Buenas tardes. I'm Antonio Tijerino, President and CEO of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and we are thrilled to partner with our friends at Nationwide to provide this critical information during this time of crisis and uncertainty when it's needed most. Thank you for joining the latest Financial Empowerment Virtual Charla with Nationwide titled Financial Health Check. This is part 2 of a 4-part series on financial wellness. Before this pandemic hit us, Nationwide and Hispanic Heritage Foundation were on track to unveil a year-long in-person campaign around financial empowerment with a multi-city tour and podcast with remarkable leaders and spokespeople in the field. However, like most of the world, we've adjusted to a virtual format where we're still able to provide our network with access to powerful voices in the financial wellness space, including influencer Vivi Schenk. And Vivi, thank you for sharing your knowledge and advice and stories with us. I'm also thrilled to share that Vivi and financial advisor Paul Roldan will be offering their great online financial education program for free to everyone on this charla, including me and my family. Please use the link that will be shared in the chat box by our team to take advantage of this unique opportunity. We have always prided ourselves as an organization for being adaptable and ready to leverage technology to best serve our community. And we have been able to do that through these charlas and creative partnerships that we have today. Now more than ever, the need for financial wellness is vital, especially with how hard it has hit the Latino and African American communities. I imagine some of you on this call may have experienced a loss of income or business or are anxious about it. Certainly, I think I am in terms of the uncertainty. I haven't slept well in the past couple of months. Some of you are about to graduate or looking for opportunities or switching career paths, and others simply want to know how to make the most of your finances right now during these trying times. I'm actually going to be taking notes to apply this to our own household. The topic of this charla impacts our everyday lives, and that's why we do these charlas on topics like the one we're doing today. It's actually part of our COVID response. As an organization, we want to make sure that we're able to share connectivity, information, and comfort. We're listening more than we are speaking. And I want to thank, again, the charla speakers, Vivi, Paul, and also Karen, for being able to provide us with this expertise, advice, and their availability to answer questions in an effort to get on a stronger financial path during and post-COVID. We are in a crisis, but post-COVID, we will have to adapt because that crisis is going to linger, especially financially. So let me introduce our first speaker. At Power Forward from West Liberty University, please welcome my friend, Lou Yarbrough III, who is the Associate Vice President, Enterprise and Cause Marketing at Nationwide. Lou, thank you and the Nationwide familia, including Lori and Hope, for your relentless commitment to our community. And this charla is another example of that. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Tony. You know, those basketball days are so far long gone, I don't even remember how they went. But thank you so much for that kind introduction. And as Tony said, my name is Lou Yarbrough, and I am the Associate Vice President of Enterprise Diverse Cause and Diverse Marketing for Nationwide. And Nationwide is a proud partner with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. And we're happy to be part of offering this virtual charla today as part of our Financial Empowerment Charlas program. You know, this program was intended to provide you with access to financial experts and tools to help you in your journey to financial wellness. We understand that financial wellness today may look a little bit different than it did at the beginning of the year. And that's why it's so important that we speak and get together like this. We also want to acknowledge the fact, and Tony hit it as well, that we are aware that the Hispanic community has been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. And you know, our partnership with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation in developing this program reinforces our commitment to helping the Hispanic community through these uncertain times and beyond. And today's virtual charla is the first in a series of 3 where you will learn some personal financial fundamentals. Our guests will not only inspire you, but they will also provide you advice on how to do things like calculate your net worth and building a spending plan. And as we get started today, I would like to introduce, one of our guest speakers and our moderator for today, Paul Roldan. Given that I've had the opportunity to work with Paul previously, I can tell you, you guys are in for a treat today. So please limit your restroom breaks so that you don't miss anything. But Paul is originally from New York. He received his bachelor's degree from Princeton University. He has a graduate degree from Harvard. And after working at the Federal Reserve Bank as a financial analyst, he relocated to Orlando, found himself in a very different economy. Hence, he started his journey as an entrepreneur in the financial services business and is now the CEO of All Gen Financial. So if you would, please join me in welcoming Paul Roldan.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate the generous introduction, and it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Tony, Juana, Lori, and the team. This is not the first time we do this, but such an important undertaking. As Lou and Tony have mentioned, this finances is such a key part of life in general, but especially in this time when we're experiencing the challenges of the pandemic and lives are being changed daily. So I'm very honored to be part of this conversation, to bring some of the knowledge. And I want to encourage you to pay attention, take notes, even though I believe that the presentation will be sent to you afterwards, will be recorded, because what we're going to share with you today is not a textbook theoretical perspective on finances. You're going to hear some real life experience from Vivi, who I'll introduce in a second. But then Karen and I are going to get a little academic in terms of practical ways to take your finances and take better control of them. And these are tried and true principles, applications that I've applied. This poor son of an immigrant and high school dropout father didn't know these principles growing up. And yet, as I learned them and started applying them, I see how they changed my life, my family's life, and changed the lives of those that we get to touch via these principles. So I'm going to encourage you to stick it out. Yes, finances can be a little dry, but when you're in control of your finances, it can be liberating. So I don't want to take too much time telling you about how excited I am. Instead, I'm going to change my excitement to introduce our next speaker. But before I do that, let me walk you through what's going to happen today in this conversation. So we're going to have Vivi Schenk speak and share some of her story of why she does what she does. Then we're going to go through the main topics of today, which is the net worth statement, understanding what it is, why it's important, and how you use it to your benefit. And then a spending plan, the dreaded budget word. We're going to talk about that and how not to have it be such a dreaded experience, but something that, again, empowers you to take control of your finances and take your finances to the next level. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So we encourage you, please type in the Q&A portion of your screen. Any questions, we will try to get to most of them, I promise, but we'll wait till the end to answer your questions. But feel free, as you think of your questions, to pop them through, to type them up and send them over. So that being the case, it is my pleasure to introduce someone who I met recently, actually. She, and yet has already impacted my life in her genuine desire to change people's lives, because it comes from a genuine place, which is her personal life story. So I'm not going to take too much time with a long introduction, but I'm going to leave you with Vivi Schenk. Vivi, please share with us some of your stories, some of your passion, and inspire us and tell us why this is so important to you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank Nationwide and Hispanic Heritage for this great space that you guys created. And it's an honor for me to share a little bit of my story with all of you guys. So my name is Vivian. You can call me Vivi for short. I teach Spanish-speaking women how to manage their money through social media and through blogging. So basically my story with money is that I failed miserably with it. I was working in corporate. I had a good job, and I'm an electronics engineer, but I've always had big dreams. But unfortunately, I did not have financial education back then. So I decided to start my own side hustle. But because of this lack of financial education, I quit my job too soon. I still had credit card debt. I did not have an emergency fund. My business was mixed up with my personal expenses. Everything was just a mess. And unfortunately, things did not work out as I expected. And I think everyone can relate with this. Sometimes life doesn't go as we expected. And after a couple of years, I found myself with a big debt, and I did not make enough money to pay my responsibilities. So that basically took me to hit rock bottom. I felt so ashamed. I felt like I had failed. I did not want people to know that I was failing so bad. So I didn't share this to anyone. So I was basically living a lie, and I would just swipe my card and pretend that everything was just all right. But it came to the point that I could not, there was nowhere else that I could get money from. Since I maxed out all my credit cards, people started calling me from collection, and I just couldn't take it anymore. It came to the point that and one day I literally had no money, that I asked the bus driver if he could take me for free to my destination, because I had not a single penny in my pocket. So this is the realization that I had, like, lack of money management will sooner or later come and bite you in the butt. And I know this because once I started learning about financial education and I started sharing what I've been learning and sharing my journey, other people started opening up and telling me, hey, you know what, I'm also experiencing this. I just came back from Disney World with my kids a couple of months ago, but now I can't pay their tuition. Like, I can't keep this up anymore. I'm also living a lie. You know, people that have been retired, that they could be enjoying their retirement, they were not enjoying their retirement because all of their money that they were receiving, they had to use it to pay their bills and pay debt. So I realized this is something that happens to everybody. It doesn't matter what age, how old you are. Lack of financial education sooner or later will come and bite you in the butt, and that's just facts. But the thing is, when you start learning these things, you can turn things around, because that's what it did for my situation. I was able to turn things around. And it's not just turning things around, but it helps you have your peace back, have your joy back. All of the things that you guys are going to learn today, it will also help you to learn how to set goals and actually achieve them. And it will also give you the chance to start dreaming again, and dreaming big. So there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. The thing is, you need to pair it with this financial knowledge so you can do it wisely. And just to give you a few examples of how you can get your peace back. For example, my sister, usually Christmas for her was a season that she would dread. It was stressful for her. And I think a lot of us can relate with that. You know, Christmas came, it was not a time of peace and a time of joy like it's supposed to. It was a time of stress. So she decided to take control over it. She decided to start managing her money. And last Christmas, she said she's had the best Christmas ever. Why? Because she was prepared. She planned for it. So she got her peace back. She got her joy back. Lack of financial education robs you of that, but you can take it back. Another example of how you can start setting goals, for example, not long ago, my husband and I, we decided we wanted to upgrade our car. So great, let's plan for it. Let's set the goal and let's purchase it. And we purchased it, all cash, no debt. And it's great to achieve these goals and achieve it debt-free. So these are the things that you can start doing too. And not only that, but you can also start dreaming big. And that's what we started doing. We started, okay, now that we have our foundation, which are the things that you're going to learn today, how to set your foundation. Okay, let's start building. So let's start learning how to invest money. Let's start learning how to build a business properly. Let's start learning how to invest in stock, how to invest in real estate. And soon we're about to buy our first investment property. So these are just some results of what financial education and all the things that you're going to learn today can give you. So I want to just encourage you guys, everyone here, I just want to encourage you. You can turn things around. If you're in a hole like I was one day, you can turn it around. And if you're not in a hole, you can avoid it. You can get your peace, get your joy back. You can start setting goals. And you can also start dreaming again. So really, I encourage you, just take a notebook, take your pen out and start taking notes, start absorbing everything and start taking action.
Vivi, thank you so much. You know, it's important. Thank you for your vulnerability, your openness, because you know, I find this to be the case with many of us, especially being Latino. You know, money was something that wasn't an open conversation at my household, usually because we didn't have much of it to talk about. But you know, it's so important that you're real and honest with yourself. You know, in the industry, they talk about different money personalities. There's 7 money personalities, and some come from a place of shame, and some come from a place of pride, and some come from a place of delusion. So it's really important that, as Vivi mentioned, because Vivi's a professional, she's an engineer, okay, and yet she struggled with money. And And Lou, generously introduced me, and I've been blessed, to have a family that encouraged education. I was blessed with some good degrees, my master's degree and all that. And in spite of that, I was not taught fundamental financial principles at these amazing institutions on how to manage my money. So we're going to jump right into, so Vivian, thank you again for sharing that. At the end, we're going to share with you an offer that's already been shared, which Vivi generously is offering to open up her academy. Now it is for Spanish speakers, okay? So she has several sessions. She's gonna give the first one away for free for those who are willing to do that. And she talks about some of the emotional and personal sides of money management, because there's the academics that Karen and I are about to go into, but there's the behavior, okay? And the desire to do this. And as at my firm, we're reading a book right now talking about investors and clients, and how many people, while they want to do something, aren't ready to do it yet. And a lot of it comes internally from their mindset and their perspective. So again, Vivi, thanks for doing that. And I want to transition now to introduce one of my colleagues, one of my friends and coworkers, and I can describe her in so many ways because she's a big part of my life. But I want to introduce Karen Vergara. Karen Vergara will be co-presenting with me. Karen and I have the pleasure of working together. I had the privilege of meeting Karen when she was still a student many, many years ago here in Florida. She says I mentored her. I think she's taught me more than I've taught her, okay? But see her journey and path in life. She's a CPA recruited by one of the top big four firms, accounting firms in the world. Left that because she wanted to change of pace and decided to go into financial planning and advice because she wanted to make a difference in people's lives. So there's a lot of passion here and a lot of intelligence behind Karen. So Karen, thank you for, I told her I want you to do this with me for so many reasons, because you're so intelligent, you bring so much to the table, and you're Latina. This is a Latino forum specifically. I think it's great that we showcase, intelligent, successful Latina women. So thank you, Karen, for joining us, and you'll be hearing from her soon. Are you ready to do this?
Ready, let's do this.
All right.
Thank you for that, Paul.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to start off with there's two basic topics of conversation, and the first one is going to be a net worth statement, okay? And the net worth, I'm going to go deep into what is a net worth, but before I go into what is a net worth, I want to ask you guys a question. We're going to open this up for a poll, okay? So this is the interactive part of the session. So Andres, if you wouldn't mind, you have a poll that says, do you know your credit score? Okay, so please take a few seconds to fill out this poll, and yes or no, do you know your credit score? So I'll give you guys a few seconds to fill that out so we can tally up the answers. And go ahead and click it on the poll, not so much in the chat, because we want to tally these up. What do you think, Karen? Is that enough time for people to answer the question? Do they know the credit score?
I think so, yeah. Let's try to see what that ended up being.
Okay, so Andres, what are we looking at here? So 82% of people know their credit score, and 18% of those who answered do not know their credit score. You know what? I'm going to give you a somewhat kudos as members of this audience, okay? Because that's a lot higher than the average American, okay? There's only about 60% of average Americans actually know their credit score. Okay, so we're leading the race in that regard. Okay, so interesting. Do you know your credit score? A lot of you do. Congratulations. Now, I'm not gonna downplay this, and I'm Hispanic from New York, so I tend to be very brutally honest. And Karen sometimes has to tell me, and my wife sometimes tells me, "Hey, tone it down." But that's nice that you know your credit score, but that really is not that important to me, at least for the sake of this conversation. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you why in a second. Okay. The next slide, if we go into it, actually goes into something that I think is more important than your credit score. It's your net worth, okay? So what is a net worth? A net worth is a measure of wealth. It's, as you see on the screen, it's how much you truly own, okay? It's a snapshot of where you stand financially. It's a means, it's a tool to track financial progress over time, okay? So the interesting thing about this is that 82% of you knew your credit score. If I ask you how many of you know your net worth, and we don't want to bombard you too many, I'm going to almost guarantee that number is going to be a lot lower. Okay, typically because you can't click on Experian or one of these agencies to give you your net worth. You have to actually track this and calculate it yourself. Okay, and yet I'm going to advocate that your net worth is a lot more important in the larger scheme of life than your credit score. And I hope I'm not offending any mortgage brokers here or any lenders here. I'm not saying that the credit score is not relevant in life, okay? If we can go to the next slide, I'm gonna get into this for a second, okay? So net worth versus a FICO or your credit score. What is the difference? See, the FICO score, as you guys know, is what most people think, oh, how are your financial situation? Oh, I've got great credit. Okay, that's not really what I'm asking. See, great credit score tells me you're good at borrowing somebody else's money. Okay, you're good at paying back debt. Okay, but it's at the end of the day, it's not your money. Okay, a net worth, I'm going to get into this, is more about your money, what is actually yours. So while a credit score is important to buy a house and real estate, as Vivi's about to buy her first real estate property, that is important. Okay, Karen and I both have investment property. Yes, it is important in a very select microcosm of your financial picture. It is not the overall, as I'm going to propose today, is not the most important thing in your financial health, okay? I know wealthy people that have horrible credit scores, and I know broke people that have great credit scores. So to me, again, a credit score is not, okay, the measurement of your financial health, okay? The credit score, the net worth versus FICO score, the net worth focuses on growing your assets and your net and what's yours versus your history of borrowing. Okay, again, it's a tool for financial decision making, and it's a benchmark for financial health and progress. Okay, so again, my big thing here is net worth should be something that if 82% of us know our credit score, okay, I'm going to advocate that we should have at least that amount of people, if not higher, that know their net worth statements. Does that make sense? Karen, I know I go on and on. Is that a fair statement?
Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So that being the case, what is a net worth? Go ahead, Andres. Let's go to the next statement. Here's a definition of net worth. It's your assets, okay, and your liabilities, and there's an equation, okay, that you're going to calculate your net worth. So assets are basically everything you own. The value of your house, so the value of your car, your bank account. You know, it's interesting. People say, "Oh, I don't have a portfolio. I haven't started investing." Yeah, you do have a portfolio. It may not be an elaborate, diverse portfolio, but if you have a checking account, that's part of your portfolio. So assets is everything that you own, and liabilities is everything that you owe. If you have credit cards, student loans, mortgage, car loan, those are liabilities. Okay. So examples, again, as I just finished listing off, Andres, go ahead. Here are examples of assets. Okay, real estate, personal property. Vivi's about to buy some more assets. Okay. Now, I don't know, I haven't gotten into this with Vivi. I don't know if she's going to finance it. Then she'll also have something on the pink side, which is a mortgage possibly on that. Okay, that would be a liability. Okay, so when you calculate net worth, it's important that you start by listing both of these categories out and putting a value next to it. How much you have in checking, how much you have in savings, etc. Okay, when you do that, then here's a simple calculation for your net worth. Go ahead, Andres. So you basically total up your assets and liabilities, and you subtract your liabilities from assets to arrive at your net worth statement. So your net worth is assets minus liabilities. Okay, seems very simple, seems very fundamental. Okay, and yet I would argue that most of us do not know. If I ask you what is your net worth today, they could not give you this number. And it's also something that changes. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you, if you do nothing else after this presentation, is go figure out your net worth. Why is this important? Because this is the starting point for you to start growing your wealth. Okay, it is an ability for you to know where your starting point is, and then over time see how you're tracking, how you're doing. Okay, it seems very easy and fundamental, and yet in over 20 years I've been doing this in the industry. Most people do not do this. We get caught up in the consumer side of finances, which, we live in capitalistic America, and that's great, but this takes you a step back to say, what am I doing to grow my net worth, my assets, my financial health? Okay, so one thing is to calculate. Okay, the calculation gives you a number. Now I'm going to encourage you, do not be discouraged. Especially if you're younger, if you're a student and you may have some student loans, a lot of net worth calculations in the beginning, I've seen them negative. Okay, and that doesn't mean that this is not a self-worth calculation. Okay, I just want to clarify, this is a financial net worth. Okay, but what happens is if you have student loans and a car debt and a mortgage, well, that's usually a lot more on the liability side than on the asset side. So it's okay to know that and not be discouraged, but then to figure out how are we going to address this, okay? Because there's a couple of ways to address this. I'm going to show you that in a second here. So why is it important to, once you have the net worth, then you start optimizing it and you manage that for growth of your financial health. And this is why we can build wealth faster once we know what our net worth looks like, okay? Also, we can reduce risk in our financial lives when we see the net worth, what are the components, and you identify the pieces of your net worth, of your portfolio, if you will, that may not be good for you, okay? And what do I mean by that? Let's give an example about this, okay? Here's an example of a net worth statement, okay? And there's so many free calculators or spreadsheets. You can go online and Google this. This is one that we use at my firm. But here's a sample of a net worth statement. And you see the way we have this is all the assets are up top, okay? Checking, HSA account, if you have cash value life insurance, different types of investments, okay? Residence, total cars. So interesting that here's your house. In this case, $340,000 is the residence, what the house is worth. Okay, so you have all the assets and they sum up to $605,855 in this example. Then on the bottom, some net worth statements have it on the side. You add up all your liabilities, so all the credit card debt, car loans, student loans, etc., mortgage. So you list it separately. So they're not aligned here because some people say, well, I have X amount of equity in my house. That's great, okay? And that is the ultimate result of your net worth. But you want to list the value of the house and the loan of the house separately, because house prices can fluctuate. Okay, as some of you know, when the housing crisis came, people lost a lot of equity, and when housing market booms, you can increase in equity. So you want to have them separate, and at the end of the day, you add it up. This one is $298,955 in liabilities, but then when we calculate the net worth, you take your assets, which is $605,855 minus $298,955. In this case, this person's or family's net worth is $306,900. Fairly straightforward, Karen?
Yeah, and so I want to ask right now, because most people would think that in order for me to build my wealth, then I just start accumulating more, right? So do I just continue increasing and adding more assets so that my net worth increases?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because there's two ways to increase your net worth, okay? As you know, there's two sides of the equation. There's the assets and then there's the liabilities. So how do you increase net worth? You can either increase your assets, which is what most people, as you mentioned, Karen, think. Oh, I need more investments or I need more savings. That would increase your net worth. But you can also decrease your liabilities, okay? If you decrease your liabilities, the mathematical result is actually the same, okay, as increasing your assets by the same amount. I'm going to show you that here in a second. So that was a good segue into this. Here's an example of that, okay? So hit next, please, Andres. So here's the same net worth, but we call that optimizing your net worth statement. Notice here in this, we took some of our checking. Before we optimized the net worth, this family had $9,400, okay, in checking savings. We took some of that and we paid off the credit card debt. So we took $2,780 from our savings. And now you see afterwards, our savings went down, but now we have no credit card debt, right? So what does that mean? Oh my God, I'm poorer? No, if you look at your net worth statement, the calculation is actually still the same. Okay, so you took it from the top, but eliminated it from the bottom. You have the same net worth. However, you have a better optimized portfolio. Why? I tell people there's bad money, poison in our portfolio, and usually debt is not a good thing, especially consumer debt. Okay, we're going to get into debt elimination in another presentation and what type of debt. You know, some people say is there good debt versus bad debt. Please join us on a future Charla for that. Okay, but there's a way to take your net worth today, and before you even start increasing it, optimizing it, changing some things around, okay, getting rid of some of the bad debt, focus. In fact, typically what we do, okay, is, and when we encourage families who come to our firm, is start attack, before you start building the top part of it, the asset side, let's get rid of the bad side of it first as quickly as possible, because that bad side is typically working against you. You're paying interest on that to someone. Again, we're going to get into this in debt elimination, why it's good to get rid of the debt. But you want to stop paying interest so that when you start building the assets, now you're earning all the interest and not paying any of it out. Does that make sense, Karen?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it goes back to just the whole idea that we don't necessarily have to accumulate, right? We see a lot of people saying, well, I need to buy more rental real estate, or I need to just get all of this other stuff, thinking that that's actually going to build wealth. when in reality, if we just get rid of debt and eliminate liabilities like you shared, we're effectively growing our wealth.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of how to calculate net worth. But then once you calculate it, how to start thinking about optimizing your net worth before you even start investing or doing things of that nature. Start with where you're at and start saying, what are the pieces of my net worth statement that I need to get rid of that keeps my net worth the same, but it makes it less risky? Okay, that's called risk management. We'll talk about that. So how do I increase my net worth? Andres, if you go to the next slide, either eliminate liabilities. Ultimately, I would say eliminate liabilities first so that you can then start increasing assets with a lot greater force. Is that a good explanation of net worth, Karen?
Absolutely.
So, and I say that, again, please continue to ask questions, but I want to transition because we start with the net worth because it's a great place to start, but then we get into the dreaded subject matter of, I hate to say the word budget, so we call it spending plan. No one, and I say this, I hate the word budget, okay? I have a business partner and he is a fiend at budgeting. He has spreadsheets and and I tell him, Jason, I am not wired that way. I think most human beings aren't wired to budget, okay? Yet, we want to talk about something called a spending plan, which is a tool to take control. Either your money controls you or you control your money, okay? So we want to present you with the possibility of controlling your money so that you can then control your financial destiny. And what better person to do that than a CPA and a financial advisor? Karen, please share with us some of your thoughts on a spending plan.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of start with just doing some poll questions. So, Andres, if you can go to the next poll question, we want to know, do you have a spending plan or a budget? So we'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Do you have one right now? Not would you want to do one, but more like, do you have one now? So let's give you a few seconds here. Okay, Andres, let's see what the results are. Okay, wow, very much 50-50. So some of you have one, some of you don't. Okay, and let's go to the third poll question, which is, how often do you monitor your expenses by category? So do you do that on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, annually, hardly ever, never?
I guess those that have a budget would be hardly ever, never, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll give them a few seconds here. All right, Andres, let's see what the result of this is. Okay, so we have some folks that do it on a weekly basis, which is great. Then some they're doing a monthly, which is also very good. Annually, okay, some of you, those 18 that said annually, we're gonna have to work on that. And then the hardly ever and never, definitely, I'm glad that you have joined us because this is what we're here for, to show you how you can monitor and how you can create a spending plan.
And just Karen, just so they know, statistically speaking, the average American was asked this question and about 67% of the average American says they have a budget, okay? And yet only 33% actually follow a budget. So it's important that we understand the difference. I tell people, yeah, it's nice that you have a budget, but do you actually use it or live by it, okay? Because a budget should be a proactive tool, not something that you say, oh man, last year I overspent by $8,000. Well, it's kind of too late. You know, it's something, that's why we don't like budgeting in terms of a number that you look back at, but a spending plan, which means you're proactive, you know, in determining how you spend your money on an ongoing basis. So Karen, show us, teach us, please.
Yes, absolutely. So the way I like to think about it is that just as Paul shared, your net worth is basically kind of think of it as a house, right? This is the house that you're building for the future. But really, the way I think about spending plans are the building blocks. So if we're not putting a right foundation in place, if we're not monitoring your spending, then you're really not going to build a good house. So this is where it all begins. Actually, there's a statistic out there, and you can even Google it, that says that 80% of millionaires did not inherit their wealth. They actually built it themselves. So that is really encouraging because that means that you can be a millionaire, right? All of us can be millionaires, but it really starts with the fact that we have to know how to manage our spending on a monthly or even, weekly basis, right? It's really the dollars that we spend daily or monthly that have the potential of helping us build wealth. So what is a spending plan? Well, it's basically a tool that we use to understand what monies come into our household and what monies go out. Okay, and we can do some projections based on historical data, for instance, on historical patterns to see how much you're going to be spending in the future. Again, you can also refer it as a budget. Budget is a bad word, so we like to call it a spending plan. And it's a better connotation to an idea that you can have control over your finances. You get to tell your dollars where to go. Rather than this idea of looking at your finances at the end of the month and determining, is there money left over for me to, go out to eat? You actually do it at the beginning of the month and you plan ahead for the future. So let's go to the next slide here and understand that why is it important? For all the reasons that I just shared, right? Financial success requires that you are proactive about your money. You need to understand, is there a surplus or a shortfall? And we'll talk about how you can calculate that in a second in your spending, in what ways you can actually fix that. And again, it's just the basic building block into building financial freedom, your house, your net worth. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what are the dangers of not having a plan? Well, number one, you may be spending more than you make, living above your means, which could possibly mean that you're going into debt because you don't have enough money to pay for your expenses. And so then you're going to use credit to cover those expenses. You may be seeing some overdrafting in your accounts. You don't know where your money goes. How many people say, I have no idea, I got all, usually it happens around tax time when we say, oh my gosh, I made all that money last year. I have no idea where it went. Well, that's because you're not in control of your money. You should know where your money goes. And the way to do that is to plan around it. Paying for unnecessary expenses. You are going to have more stress, more money fights. There's going to be less income for you to actually fulfill your financial goals. Now, the other side of that, what are the benefits of having a spending plan? Well, you're going to start living within your means. You're going to avoid new debt. You're going to stop seeing those overdrafts and those fees coming into your bank account.
Karen, if I can
Yes.
stop you on that.
Sure.
It's interesting, and if there's any bankers in the audience, I'm not attacking you per se, but a couple of years ago, banks reported that they received over $11 billion in overdraft fees. Okay, that's a lot of money because you overspent money that you didn't have. Typically happens because, oops, I didn't realize I wasn't monitoring my money that closely, and I wrote a check that I didn't realize it was going to bounce, etc. So most people don't want to spend $11 billion on overdraft fees, but it's typically an indication that we are not in control of our finances.
Yeah, and sometimes, again, it's the little, you might think $30 here, $30 there, but those really add up. And that's money that's actually not really going to building your house. That way, then we're going to be more careful with how we spend our money. And then you're going to have reduced stress, less money fights, and you're going to have this freedom knowing that the way that you're building wealth is in a way that actually is under your control. So let's go to
the audience, Karen, before you go, I told the audience that we're going to be real. This is real stuff. And again, talking about budgeting is like, oh my God, you want me to, you want to strap me and force me to live on a, no, this is supposed to be free. And you'll never hear this from Karen. But Karen has applied these principles. I know her personally. I know her financial situation. And she has applied these principles diligently to the point, you'll never hear Karen brag about this, but one of her passions is traveling. So Karen is currently debt-free. Karen, how many countries have you traveled to in your young age?
41 countries.
41 ridiculous amount of countries, okay? I don't think the average human being on the planet travels that far, but that was her passion, and she had a goal, and part of her being able to do that is to stay away from debt so she can accumulate money instead of paying interest. So I'm bragging for Karen. Kudos to her, because I'm very proud to know that she's making her dreams come true, because when you control yourself and you apply disciplinary principles, you free yourself to live out your dreams and your goals. So Karen, kudos, continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Paul, and I appreciate that. And you know, there's also something behind that. I want to share with everyone before we kind of get started on to how we're going to do this, that thankfully, I've been pretty good with money. I knew I wanted to be a CPA since the age of 17. So I knew all about finances since high school. However, when I met my husband, so I had no debt. I graduated college debt-free. I mean, I was in a really good position after college. And then I met my husband, who had been in the country for only 2.5 years. He's an immigrant like myself. He moved from Venezuela. And in 2.5 years of living in the US, he had gotten $60,000 of debt. That included student loans, credit card, car loans. And so the first thing we did, we joke around, because at the time I was not doing financial advising. We joked that he was my first client. We sat down, and for the first 18 months of our marriage, we got rid of the debt. And the way we did this was just by kind of what we're sharing today, right? So all of these principles we have actually used, just like even Vivi shared. This is real stuff. This is something that you can do. So this is what we're going to kind of go on into. How then can we create a spending plan so that we can meet our financial goals and the things that you really desire for your future? So let's go to the next slide, please, Andres. So here's where we kind of start. The first step is, let's determine how much money comes into our home. So we are going to take our net income. So for instance, we might get a $50,000 annual salary, but we know that we don't actually get $50,000 in our paychecks. We get a net amount because there are taxes that need to be paid to Uncle Sam. So we're going to start with just that. We're going to figure out, do I get paid on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis? And then determine if there are other things that come into the picture. So things like bonuses, commissions. Do you have variable income? A lot of self-employed folks are in this boat because they basically their income might fluctuate. It might be different from month to month. So we're going to start with that, step number one. So let's go through some examples of kind of what that looks like so that you can do this on your own. So let's go to the next slide, please. The first example is we have Joe. He gets paid on a weekly basis. So he takes his weekly paycheck, and which is $800, and he multiplies that by 52 weeks, divides it by 12 months, and that's going to give him his average monthly take-home pay. Let's go to the next example, please, which is Maria. She gets paid every other Friday. That means that she gets paid bi-weekly. Her paycheck is $2,100. So we take the $2,100, we multiply by that 26 paychecks, 26 because she gets 2 extra paychecks a year. Some of you that might get paid bi-weekly, you see sometimes, like about two times a year, I get an extra paycheck. Well, that's because when you get paid bi-weekly, you actually get a full 26 paychecks. We divide that by 12 months, and then that's going to give her monthly take-home pay, which is $4,550. Let's go to the next example, which is Juan. Juan is a self-employed. So he's an independent contractor. His income varies throughout the year. So what he does is he's going to look at his last year and say, okay, I grossed $80,000. Okay. That means that because he's self-employed, he has to send, there's not an employer taking the taxes out of his paycheck. So he's the one responsible for ensuring that he pays some quarterly payments. So hopefully he works with a CPA or with a tax preparer that makes sure that he is sending quarterly payments. Otherwise, he's going to have a big tax bill at the end of the year and be shocked because he's not sending money on a regular basis to Uncle Sam. So we're going to go ahead and take the $80,000 that he grosses, that he gets from his clients. We're going to multiply that by 80. We're assuming that he pays about 20% in taxes. We divide that by 12 months, and that's going to give us $5,333. That's his average monthly take-home pay.
And as you mentioned, Karen, you should probably work with a CPA if you're self-employed or an accountant, because we're using 20% just as an average tax rate. But if you make more money, your tax rate could be higher. So that means you have to take away more from your paycheck and send it to taxes. So this is just a generic example.
Correct. Yes. Let's go to example number 4. which is Monica, who gets paid on the 1st and the 15th of the month. So she gets $2,700, but she does get once a year a $5,000 bonus net of all taxes and deductions. So we're going to take her bi-monthly paycheck of $2,700, multiply that by 24, plus the $5,000 bonus. We divide it by 12 months, and then $5,816 is going to be her average monthly take-home pay.
The reason this is important, Karen, is because how you get paid dictates what your actual monthly amount is. As you see here, there's different formulas if you get paid semi-monthly, bi-weekly, monthly, annually, quarterly, whatever it is if you're a contractor. But bills typically are calculated monthly. You pay your mortgage once a month, your rent once a month, utilities once a month. So we want to take however way you make your money and transform that into the way you actually pay your bills. So that's what these exercises do for you.
Exactly. So we'll go into the next thing, which is step number 2, which is going to be, we'll go to the next slide, Andres, please. Perfect, thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to categorize our spending. So we're going to kind of divide that between housing, utilities, food, transportation, health, insurance. And we have given you here some ratios where you want to kind of stick around, ensuring that your take-home, your expenses are around the same percentage when compared to your income. So let's go to the next slide, please. This is a sample of the spending plan. So you're going to take your take-home pay, you're going to add it up, right? If you're in a household, you're going to have 2 salaries, and then you're going to divide it between the different categories. There are things that are called fixed expenses, things that don't change, like Paul just mentioned. So your rent is going to be the same from month to month. Your car payment is going to be the same from month to month. But there are things that are going to vary, like your utility bills may vary, your food bill may vary. So we want to just go ahead and then what usually we recommend is that you go back and you look at the past 3 months of your expenses. So go back to your bank statements, your credit card statements, and then use those to create your spending plan at the beginning of the month for this first time that we're doing this, okay? And then you're going to have an idea of where your money is going, and then you're going to say, there are areas here that I don't really agree with spending so much money on food, for instance. We really could just start eating at home more often, maybe taking some more lunches to work. So we're going to start working on that. Let's go into the next slide, please, so we can kind of show you what the last step is. Our last step is basically we're going to take our net income, and then we're going to subtract all of our expenses, and that's going to give you whether you have a surplus or a shortfall. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to figure out, is your number positive or is your number negative? If you have a positive number after you've done that calculation, then that means that you're going to use those dollars to direct them to meet your financial goals, whether that's getting rid of debt, whether that's building your emergency reserves, saving for a new car, etc. So that's what we're going to do. If you have a negative income, then we need to make some adjustments, because that means that you are living above your means, and that there's a big chance that you are using credit and you're using debt to be able to cover that shortfall. Okay, it's very basic math. So if you don't have enough, if you're not bringing enough and you're spending more than what you bring in, then that shortfall is going to then more than likely be used or be paid with credit. And we don't want to do that.
So let's say, Karen, and this is not judgmental. I've seen it all. I've seen positive, I've seen negative. So if we do this exercise and I come up with, at the bottom of my sheet, a negative net income. So basically I'm in a deficit amount. Besides panic and cry, what should I be doing to proactively change that? Because obviously we want to flip it to the positive.
That's right. Yeah. So there are very good steps that you can certainly take. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to show you there are ways that you can actually improve your monthly cash flow. So what you're going to do is, the first thing, as I shared, you're going to reduce or eliminate your discretionary expenses. Discretionary expenses, again, are things that you can live without. Those are kind of your wants. If we look at needs and wants, needs are, you definitely need a house, you need a roof over your head, you need to eat, you need utilities, you need transportation. But wants may be new clothes, new furniture, you know, getting a new puppy. All of those things are things that you might not need right now if you're trying to really build wealth. So the other thing you can do is increase your monthly household income. Right now, with all the different apps and opportunities out there to do Uber Eats or Uber or DoorDash, Instacart, you can have a side hustle where you say, for a short period of time, I'm going to make a sacrifice, which is again what my husband and I did. So what we did to get rid of all his debt was that we lived off of my salary for 18 months, and we used all of his salary to pay off the debt. And again, that was a short-term sacrifice. Remember, now we travel the world and, you know, and we enjoy our money, but for a short period of time, we really had to make a sacrifice and say, this is what we want. We want to get rid of this debt because we want to build wealth. So if we're going to do that, we're going to live off of just one salary rather than two. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to pay off the debt, because the less money that's going to servicing debt, that means that there's money that actually is coming in, or you're going to have free up some cash for you to actually do some things with that money. And then scale down your lifestyle. It might mean, like I shared, a short-term sacrifice of not eating out or not traveling. But if, again, you have that goal in mind, you know that it's going to be ending soon, you're just trying to do this for the short term. So the long term, you actually get to enjoy your money.
But Karen, I just love Starbucks.
Well, I think it's really priorities, right? So do you love Starbucks more than you love being in debt? If that's the case, keep getting the Starbucks coffee. But if you really hate debt, if you don't want to continue being a slave to the debt, then just for a short period of time, try to maybe make some coffee at home.
And that little nuance, and I want to let you keep going because I know you're almost done with your side of it. But you know, I have a friend of mine who told his wife when she went, he's this big, you know, budget guy. He was all bought in, and she went and bought a Starbucks and came. He says, "Do you know what that cup of coffee just cost you?" And he basically had done a calculation of $5 every day for a year. It's about $2,000 compounded over the next 20 years. It was like, I forgot how many ridiculous, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. So a little extreme, but I think what we're saying, as you heard Karen say, short-term sacrifice for long-term happiness and freedom. I have a similar story. I'm married to an immigration attorney, and she's an attorney. So you know what financial aid is for attorneys? A big old loan. Okay, so she, you know, attorney, when you have these loans, you're like, oh my goodness. And I told her, don't worry, we're gonna do this, we're gonna live off of my income, okay? And we're gonna use your income to pay similar as Karen. And she was able to pay that off, and wow, she wrote that check to pay that whole thing off. It was just liberating. It was almost the other extreme, because now she's like, can we spend that money now? You know, okay. You know, because we're so used to not spending it. So it is liberating. It took a short-term sacrifice, but now we're feeling the long-term happiness and freedom effects of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll go through just kind of some best practices when it comes to creating your spending plan. So the first thing, again, we want to track the spending pattern over the past 3 months, but we also want to just give yourself about another 3 months once you start using this method. You want to be patient with yourself. You're not going to change all overnight, and it's not going to be perfect that first time you do it, that first month that you do it. It's going to be take a little bit of adjustment, and that's okay. At the end of the day, we're taking just small steps towards building wealth, and this is where it all starts. The second thing is you want to find a method or a tool that works best for you. So is a spreadsheet good? Is mint.com good? Is paper and pen good? It really depends on your preference. There is no right or wrong answer. Whatever works best for you, you might even start with paper and pen and then move to a spreadsheet or move to some kind of software, and that's totally okay. The other thing you want to do is you want to include expenses that occur less frequently. So for instance, like Vivi shared with her sister, that Christmas was a really stressful time of the year. Christmas only happens once a year, and we know it's coming, right? Every year, Christmas comes. So rather than you being stressed about it, how about you think, okay, this Christmas, I want to spend $500, $1,000 on Christmas and really enjoy buying gifts, etc. So what you do is that you divide that in 12 months, and beginning in January, you start saving slowly, so that when December comes, because Christmas will come, then you take that money and you spend it freely and you enjoy your money. The other thing is completing a new spending plan each month. It's going to vary, again, because birthdays happen, baby showers happen, trips happen. So what you want to do is sit down at the beginning of the year, look over your spending, plan it out, and then actually execute it. And if you're married, yeah.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you're married, sit down with your spouse and really work on your spending. I always say to everyone, especially my clients, this is the hardest thing my husband and I had ever done. We don't have any kids, so that so far has been the hardest thing we've ever done, but it was also the best thing we've ever done because we learned how to communicate and we also learned how to work as a team so that we could actually fulfill our common financial goals.
Yeah, and give yourself some grace. You know, as Karen mentioned, you will mess up. I did, okay? And I'm in the financial world, you know, because I can be my biggest critic. You know, I can be, and it can be intimidating. Oh my goodness, you want me to, and you know, you want me to track all my spending? Again, whether it's spreadsheets, there's so many tools that you can use today. You know, my grandmother used to use envelopes. You know, that was her system. You know, there was no internet back then. So she would put X amount of money. That was her budget. You know, to go back to what Karen was saying as far as those categories, which you'll get a copy of. You know, you've heard that term, I'm house poor, you know, means you're probably spending too much on your mortgage. So those are good guidelines for you to start creating your budget if you don't have one and say, oh, am I living within this framework that'll help free me when you get to the future? Because again, my grandmother didn't have these tools that, you know, when she opened the envelope and there was nothing in it, well, se acabó. So there's no way I could spend any money. That was her forced budget. So there's so many different ways to do this, but give yourself some grace.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's kind of the last slide here where before we go into our Q&A, if you have any setbacks, don't give up, learn from your mistakes, make adjustments, and just keep moving forward.
Excellent. Excellent. So Karen, thank you for sharing that. Now I know we've gone a little bit over time, but we feel this is really important stuff. So we want to answer a few questions here. I'm going to ask Vivi to join us again if she can turn her camera on. So we can go to some Q&A, and I know there's been a bunch of questions. If you still have some, please type them in the Q&A section, not in the chat, in the Q&A. I'm going to try to get to as many of these. We're going to try to get to as many of these as possible. We have it, what is the best way to reduce mortgage debt? I'm going to sound a little bit, and I don't mean to diminish this question, to pay it. I mean, literally now when I say that, accelerate payments, there's different, you'll hear different strategies. Oh, send an extra payment a year. Or, you know, divide it into a couple of months, your monthly payment to a couple of weeks and send one every 2 weeks, which in effect, you end up sending an extra payment a year. So anything you could do, if you get a bonus and you weren't counting on that for your budgeting purpose, great, apply that. It's interesting because sending one extra payment a year, if you have a 30-year mortgage, which is a whole different conversation, how much you end up paying for a house with a 30-year mortgage. But if you send one extra payment a year, that reduces the lifetime of your mortgage by about 10 to 12 years, okay, depending on interest rates and all that type of stuff. So it's very powerful. One little step can really make a big difference in reducing your mortgage debt. But at the end of the day, is try to accelerate sending extra payments. Some people say refinance. There's mathematical considerations. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But without getting into specifics, because your situation may vary, at the end of the day is keep your interest rate low and send extra payments. So another question that came up, okay, this is interesting because we're going to cover this a little bit in the future. What's the difference between emergency funds and savings? I know Vivi or Karen, one of you want to address that because we're going to cover it. I don't want to get too into depth because we're going to talk about it in one of our future charlas, but any of you want to address the difference?
Yeah, Vivi, go ahead.
Okay, sure. So emergency fund is basically for a rainy day. And your savings, these are the things that you can start building up for your goals.
Right.
Like our car, for example. So we did not pay our car with the money of our emergency fund. That's the money that you have there and you do not touch it.
That's right.
And just if it's like a case of like an actual emergency.
That's exactly right. I'll give you a preview of that charla. An emergency fund is the life happens fund. Okay, you got flat tires, you know, you got sick and you got this incredible medical bill. It's the stuff that happens for emergencies, okay? So you typically want to have, or you got laid off. Right now in the pandemic, we have, I think, what, 10 to 15% of population is laid off. So you want to be able to cover 3 to 6 months of your expenses, depending, and we're going to get into that in a future conversation. Savings, as Vivi mentioned, is very intentional for you know, I'm going to buy a new car in 3 to 4 years. I want to take this vacation, etc. So that's not a life happens, oops, caught me by surprise. It's your intentional control of your money for a future expense. Thank you, Vivi. Another question, is federal retirement planning part of the advice I can receive from a financial planner? That's a great question. Yes. I'm assuming this is a person who works for a federal agency, and planning should take into account the different types. Financial planning, and I'm going to be biased because I am one, okay, takes into account the different circumstances, different payouts from pension plans, etc., what you need, different assets. So yes, that would be one of the considerations in doing your financial plan and your retirement plan. Here's an interesting one. Does Credit Karma negatively impact your score every time you check? I have an answer. Do you guys want to take that one?
Yeah, as far as I know Credit Karma doesn't really impact your score, because it's just like you would call maybe a soft pull, a pull. So I think it's fine. It's not going to really matter. But again, going back to the whole idea that, you know, credit score just tells me how well you know how to manage other people's money, how well you know how to manage debt. Let's concentrate on more on your net worth. So if you want to track something, I would say concentrate on tracking your net worth. Not that the credit score is not important, but really when we're trying to build wealth, your net worth is going to be more.
Yeah, and yes, I don't work for Credit Karma, but yes, as far as I know, I used to have Credit Karma because I like to test stuff that people are exposed to. So I said, let me enroll in this, see what it says. So it didn't affect my score, but it did sometimes give me inconsistent scores. I had 2 scores that were here and then one that was way up here, or the other way around. So it's not always the most accurate. So at the end of the day, if you need to track your credit score, go to the agencies directly, because you have to pay a little bit for it, but it's going to be a lot more accurate than the free software. Okay, how can one prepare if you're going to gain graduate student debt if you already have undergraduate debt? Oof. How can you prepare? I don't know how you can prepare. I mean, the first step is try to stay away from graduate student debt. If you already have, you don't want to put more debt on top of debt, right? Is that a fair answer, ladies? If you have no choice, yes, there are some situations where I've heard, you know, my studies will increase my income by X amount, certain nursing degrees, for example, et cetera. You're stuck, and if you get this degree, there's formulas that we can use depending on your industry to say, okay, that might be worth the return on your investment, you know, of the debt. So at the end of the day, I would say try to avoid it altogether, but if not, you have to do a calculation of the income possibly generated by the debt versus the debt that you're going to incur to see if it's worth that pay. I told some people, don't go to graduate school. And that seems harsh, you know, but it wasn't justifiable, you know, say, okay, now the ego, I have a master's degree in this, but my income went up $3,000 a year. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see a few questions that I really feel like we should answer. There's one that says, would optimizing our net worth result in building generational wealth? Is this realistic? I mean, I'm going to have to say, yes, absolutely. Again, I just shared that statistic with you. 80% of millionaires did not inherit their wealth. So you have the capability of building wealth for generations to come. So yes.
That's exactly right. And there was someone who answered the question about graduate school as well, saying explore employer tuition reimbursement, research schools in terms of tuition requirements. So yeah, there's different resources. It's great when your employer pays for it. That's ultimately the best recourse, you know, if they're willing to pay for that. So I've seen a lot of people stay away from that graduate debt by going with an employer that actually paid for it and going from there. Okay, so any advice for recent grads about starting building credit? Are credit unions better? No, credit unions aren't better. It's not about the credit union and about building credit. You know, it's interesting because yes, I get this a lot. We coach teenagers who start in high school with some programs that we have and coaching them in credit. Building credit, yes, is important, especially when you want to buy a house, but there's simple ways to do that. I mean, you can get what's called a secured credit card, which basically you send the credit card $500 or $1,000 and you use that and your limit is capped on the money you sent them. So you really aren't allowed to get further into debt or at all into debt because they have the money. You know, it's an asset-backed credit card. So, but you're using it as a credit card up to that limit and it's paying itself and you're paying it off to build your credit. If you have, you know, someone, you know, a relative who's willing to co-sign, you know, put you on they're paying, and if you're younger and they're paying their mortgage and they somehow get to put you on that or a credit card, there's different ways. But I would not stress about the whole building credit again. Not that it's not important, but it will happen by nature because in this country, everything is based on credit. You know, I had a car dealership one time run my credit score, and I told him, I don't have any debt. He's like, what do you mean you don't have any debt? I don't have a car debt. I don't have a student loan. I don't have it. He's like, so you're going to have a horrible credit score. My credit score is over 800. He didn't get it. He's like, what? That doesn't make sense. Because what you've taught about credit scores is not real for the most part. Okay. So yes, there's these little ways to build your credit score, but don't let that be the focus of your financial health and well-being. Okay. Is it worth to shop around for savings accounts, or is it better not to save money, in quotations, except for emergency funds, but instead invest it? Oof. This is a pseudo investing question. So any of you want to address that one, maybe Karen, or do you want me to tackle it?
Go ahead, Vivi. I think you can do this one.
Oh gosh. Okay. Is it worth to shop around for savings accounts, or is it better not to save money except for emergency funds, but instead say, actually, I would let you, Paul.
Okay, I'll deal with it. It's not better or, they're all important. Everyone needs an emergency fund. I have an emergency fund. Okay, everyone needs an emergency fund. And before you start investing, and you're going to learn this in the future, Charla, you should have an emergency fund. Because I've seen too many people start investing, and that's not guaranteed. You'll learn that in the third Charla, which is about investing. And yet something happens, you get laid off, the market's down, and you have to liquidate because you don't have an emergency fund. It's the worst thing. It's like calamity after calamity. So it's not either or, it's both. You should have an emergency fund. You should save for your short-term goals. Investing is a long-term proposition for things that are over 5 years, time horizons, retirement, college funding, maybe things of that nature. That's when you invest, because that allows you to have time for the markets or whatever investment is to do its stuff. So it's not either or. Now, if for your savings account, emergency funds, I will say this, there are these high yield money market accounts, okay? Again, no offense to anyone who works for a banking institution, but as you guys know right now, banks aren't offering a lot of interest. Interest rates are low, but you'll find, I'm not gonna promote any particular company, but you can Google high yield, investing accounts or high yield money market accounts. And there's some that are earning a little over 1%. Which is a lot higher currently than what a savings account or checking account would give you. So if you're going to tweak, it's not a lot, but it's a little bit better than what you might be getting, at a basic bank account. Okay. I think you talked about the apps and the ways to make the calculations. You talked about mint.com. That's one of them. There's several apps out there. Okay. Could going bankrupt on a car in order to save money be detrimental in the long run? So this person, I'm assuming, doesn't have any savings or a savings plan. You're thinking of going bankrupt, maybe stop paying the car so they can now start saving. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of looking first, create a spending plan, see if there is the ability for you to have some extra net income, or if you need to increase your income so that you don't go bankrupt. I mean, that's going to be on your credit for a while. It's really going to be detrimental. So I would say try to see if that is your last resource, then maybe consider it. But if you can, just start by doing a spending plan and determining if it really makes sense for you.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask the last question because I've been told we're running over here. But I will say this. We've been told that we will address all of your questions. If they weren't answered on this charla live, we will address them via direct email. So don't be discouraged if we didn't get to your question, and you'll have some resources that are shared with you at the end of this. But last question, will everyday spending be considered liabilities such as food, rent, clothing, school supplies? No. Rent is not a liability. Well, it is a liability, but it's a fixed expense. It's the discretionary expenses, credit card debts, car loans, things of that nature. Now, a mortgage is a liability. Okay, so it's things that you have to pay, but food is not a liability. It's just a fixed expense that you have to spend every month. So that being the case, I'm going to stop the questions now. Okay, I will say that I want to thank you for listening, for taking the time to invest in your future. I also want to reaffirm Vivi and Karen and myself. You'll hear this again, have offered to all the listeners free access to our respective academies. Vivi has a academy in Spanish, okay, that talks about especially the heart and the emotion side initially, and then how to go from there. Ours gets right into a lot of what you heard today. So you'll have more information on that, on how to join this for free. So with that said, I want to thank you guys again. Thank Tony and Lou for the privilege and honor of being able to do this. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Tony. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks, everyone. Vivi, Karen as well, and the Nationwide and Hispanic Heritage Foundation team. I love all the energy from the chat box. That's the part that really gets me going and how engaged people are, and that's what these charlas are all about. And thank all of you that are out there, whether you're a student, an employee on furlough, an entrepreneur, or anyone that is concerned about their finances during and after this pandemic. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And people were asking, where can we access this? Well, we taped it, so we will be posting it on YouTube and all our other socials, as well as giving you the opportunity to share it, not just with your family or looking at it again, but with your networks as well. We all heard about practical, actionable items and actions that we can take to create a spending plan today. And we'll be sharing with you all these resources and budget templates available to help you on your journey to achieving financial wellness. Don't forget to take advantage of the online financial literacy programs being offered exclusively to today's Charla participants for free to Vivi and thanks to Vivi and Paul. And please visit our site that's called foryourfinancialwellness.com. Again, foryourfinancialwellness.com, and that's an FOR, not just the numeral 4, to view our podcasts and more helpful tips and ideas, and to stay in touch with us and Nationwide. Make sure to join our next Financial Empowerment Charla with Nationwide on creating a debt elimination plan. I definitely need that one. Taking place on August 26th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stay safe, stay positive, and stay connected. Thanks, everyone.